Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we're talking about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Doctor Who, as well as the latest episode of Charmed. Like always, if I'm talking about something you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I had to say about this week's episode of Doctor Who, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Charmed. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Doctor Who. I'm just going to add this as a note. This is like the fourth time I had to redo this intro just because I kept messing it up on little bits, and I'm just me. Even this intro wasn't perfect, but it was better than the first one. Well, first three. Nevertheless, that's beside the point. A very interesting episode of Doctor Who this week. I love the little subtle thing at the beginning because it's like, oh wow, something's chasing him. I'm like, oh, what is this? And it's like this light, and it's like, oh, basically it's a Kerblam bot basically sent to deliver packages, which is kind of interesting. And it's like, oh, it's a VIDS. I'm like, ah. She's like, oh, this is something. It's like, I don't remember ordering anything. It must be something from a long time ago. And it pulls out the VIDS. I'm like, nice, okay. Which, you know, my limited knowledge, or at least remembering a lot of Doctor Who, I'm like 11. I was like, Matt Smith. I'm like, just because I was like, oh, that's so interesting. And she's even like, oh, does it still look good for me? And just kind of like, yeah. I'm not like, I love it. I love it. Notice she isn't wearing it later on, but I guess fezzes just kind of aren't her thing. It's like, yeah, you know, fezzes, they might not be cool anymore, you know, so that might be the thing we're dealing with. But the Doctor receives a message saying help, and so they go undercover at the Kerblam business. Was so interesting because, for one, it's a large-scale business on the moon. Apparently only 10% of its employees are actually human. The other 90%, the whole thing's like automatic the rest of the way. So there's at least 10,000 employees there, but it's just like, wow, that's still kind of crazy. I love the Doctor like switching jobs with Graham because it's like, oh, I gotta find the person who's needing help, and then Graham's like, well, what am I stuck doing? And it's like, oh, he's kind of maintenance, so he's kind of maintenance / janitor, so he's kind of like, I won't have a word of this from any of you. I did like, you know, the doc. I mean, what I thought was kind of neat in the way this episode was divided to, each of the teams ended up meeting and bonding with some people, like obviously Graham and Charlie, which we'll get to that later, and then like Kiera and Ryan and the Doctor, and then, you know, Yasmin with Dan. So it's just all these little pairings I thought was kind of pretty nice. And I guess it was something interesting too, because I didn't even think about it too, because I mean, well, obviously each of the three different groups were representing three of the different like job groupings in Kerblam, so I thought that was kind of interesting. But it's like, you know, Kiera was kind of like a little bit, you know, it's like life wasn't always the best in the sense of like she never knew her parents, and so she was very positive even though life wasn't all that great. She'd never received a present before. Like the only present in her entire life she got was for her previous birthday, and that's because Judy, the head of people, which is kind of interesting because rather than calling it like human resources, it's called just the Judy of people, because there's people and the rest are robots. So it's kind of interesting phrasing. It's like, yeah, but it fits with the whole situation. Even her having to be like, yeah, go team organic, because it's like, oh yeah, you spend so much time around automated stuff, you kind of catch on to the lingo and stuff like that, which I thought was kind of an interesting thing. But for her, she had like, you know, this very positive outlook, even though things weren't kind of all that great. She was like, oh yeah, I was kind of terrible at my job at first, but then I kind of take a deep breath and it's like, everything's okay, you can do this. I almost halfway believe it. And it's like, she was very positive, you know. And when Slade came, it was kind of giving her a little, like, guff, I guess would be the right word. That the Doctor and Ryan kind of stuck up for her, and she was basically like, hey, you know, as a manager of all of this, you should kind of, you know, respect your people a little bit better if you want them to kind of do the same thing and kind to you and stuff like that. And it's like a good, you know, manager will know their employee and know when they need help. So it's like, is there anyone that needs help? I love that the Doctor still uses it as an opportunity. Like, does someone here need help? Also, when Judy was like, oh yeah, don't get on conveyor belts, the Doctor was like, had her mouth open like, wait, what do you mean? What do you mean we can't get up there? It's like, come on, Doc, you really thought you were going to be able to do that? But she's like, great, now this is just ruined. That look on her face, just like, what's the point now, you know? What's the point of those conveyor belts sitting there being cool if you can't climb on them and stuff? That's just her expression, and I love. But basically, it turns into this huge conspiracy, which I like the Doctor being like, there's three things I don't like. I don't like bullies, I don't like conspiracies, and I don't like people being hurt. And she's like, all three seem to kind of be going on. Also, like, you got to admit that the postmen in this, the Kerblam post guys look a little scary. And I love her being like, what was it, the term she used? Roboticist? I forgot, kind of being like racist against robots. She's like, some of my best friends are robots. So, but it's, you gotta admit, those things kind of a little creepy, just smiling like that, just looking at you, just like, they kind of look like dolls out of a horror movie, just the way they kind of like slowly turn their heads like that. It's like, yeah, it's almost like you're designed to kind of be a little creeped out by them, you know? I was actually kind of halfway expecting this, like, they're made from humans or something, right? Like, basically, I think in my head, I was kind of treating them kind of like Cybermen, where it's kind of like, oh yeah, there's a human inside kind of forced and turned into one of those things. Or at the very least, humans were being, God, that'd be a weird word to use. I was going to say milked, but I don't know. Like, there's some liquefying stuff that comes up later on, so I was like, oh, is that actually because I was like, oh, go ahead, talk about it. Like, I thought that was like, oh, they use it to fuel the robots. That's like the dastardly thing behind this whole operation. Not to be the case, that's something else entirely, but we'll get to it soon enough. But it's like a situation of like, okay, a lot of stuff is going wrong here, and it's like, Judy and Slade didn't really know. Slade knew. I was thinking like, oh man, is he going to be the bad guy behind this? Because he's kind of a dick. But it's like, no, Slade is actually, he was actually looking into this, but he didn't know who was behind everything. He didn't know who to trust. He didn't trust Judy, and he didn't trust the doc and the team because he thought like, oh, you were here, like maybe y'all had something to do with it. But yeah, and I like it when the doctor gets serious. Like, that's always some of my favorite moments, when the doctor's kind of like, if anything happens to my friends or anyone else at this facility, you're going to have to deal with me. And the doctor's walking away, and it's like, was that too bombastic? And Yasmin's like, I think that was just about right. And Ryan's like, I liked it. It's just kind of like, I love that. Like, how intimidating the doctor can be at sometimes. The doctor can be fun and, you know, funny, but also at times can lay down the wall if need be. I always thought that was kind of I love that aspect of the doctor. Certain elements show up more depending on the doctor. You get what I'm trying to, hopefully you understand what I'm trying to say. So then there's also like that cute thing of like, oh, Kiera and Charlie so totally being into each other, and Graham's like, oh yeah, I have this superpower that can pick up on subtle hints and stuff like that with the human person. And then Charlie's like, really? And Graham's like, no, you make it super obvious that you two like each other the way you kind of are so nervous around each other. I'm like, oh, that's so cute. And then it kind of gets a little sad later on because it's like, oh yeah, Kiera sadly ended up dying. It's like, it's a complicated situation in itself because, you know, for one, finding out that Charlie was a bad guy the entire time, did not see that come. At first when he was like, no, don't do that, and I was like, wait, does he know more about this? Like, did the system force him to do stuff that he didn't want to do? It's like, no, he did that all himself. Like, let me run some things down. Like, the fact is that Kiera ended up having to die because the system was trying to prove a point. It's like, this is what you're planning on doing to a whole bunch of people if you do what you're going to do. And, you know, this is what you're doing. This happened to someone you care about. You're going to do this to tons of people that other people care about. And it was crazy because I wasn't expecting it to. I mean, in the long run, it is something interesting on multiple levels about certain things that kind of the doctor ends up pointing out, and it's like, it makes sense in retrospect. It's like, for one, that the person asking for help the entire time was the system itself, because it makes perfect sense because Slade had brought it up earlier. It's like, yeah, the only people, no one actually touches those slips. I mean, they do, but where the slips come from, it's automated. So that's where they come from. And, you know, the department that Kiera and the doctor or anyone worked at in that regard, like, there was no time for anyone to kind of write a note without really, you know, especially because like there's eyes always on you, people are always listening, so there's always something going on. Like, you know, you wouldn't be able to easily just slip that by. And I was like, oh man, it makes perfect sense because it said it from the beginning. The slips come from the system, so it was asking for help. Which makes you wonder, I mean, I guess like you have the address of everyone all across the place. So of course, you know, I mean, the doctor probably may have received packages in the past. So that's why they know about the doctor specifically, which is always interesting. I mean, to be fair, the doctor's reputation kind of precedes them. So it's kind of like, okay, so I guess that's how. But, yeah, I mean, it's just, the system was trying to teach him a lesson, but it's just sad that Kiera had to pay the price for it. Because it seemed like she was such a good girl, and it's kind of like a shame that she had to die for that. You know, it's messed up on the system's part, but like, I guess it was like its way of trying to be like, dude, what you're doing is wrong. Which is so sad because like everyone spent so much time with Charlie. Obviously, he cared about Kiera, and then like everyone was like, all like the fun adventure kind of that him, Ryan, and Yasmin were on, going down those conveyor belts and stuff like that. And it's, I love Ryan being like, oh yeah, you know, he's kind of like ready to break rule number one. And Yasmin's like, have you done this before? And he's like, yeah, my previous job. Did end well. He like broke an ankle or whatever. Plus he got his final warning about that whole situation. So But even with under his circumstances, I even love like the whole him and Charlie high-fiving and Charlie falling off the conveyor belt. I'm like, oh god. But that whole thing, it's like they kind of went through that together. It's like, hey, and it turns out he's the bad guy. It's like, I always think that's kind of interesting when you're kind of with the bad guys. I like storytelling like that, where it's like, oh yeah, the person that's with you the entire time you thought was a good person, secret was a bad guy. And it's so sad with Charlie's situation too, because like, obviously, like, Charlie is like an extreme radicalist in that regard, but like you understand where he's coming from, because it's like because everyone, it's like, oh, we should consider ourselves lucky because we happen to be part of the 10% of humans that are employed. It's like there are so many people in that area that are super unemployed, because even Dan was like, yeah, all his money he set it up so that his daughter is taken care of, because he's like, yeah, me and her mom, things that I wasn't always the best when it came to my wife, and so he's trying to make up for it now with his daughter, and he's like, she loves him and he loves her so much, so everything he does, he takes, like, every once in a while, twice a year, he'd splurge and kind of take a trip back to the planet to visit her, but all the other money was sent to, like, saved up for her education, and it's like, oh man. And just to know that he dies in the end, and especially because it hurts Yasmin a lot, because it's like, if he hadn't switched scanners with me, he'd be dead. And I'm guessing with the robots grabbing him like that, that was because the robot, the system was trying to warn him, but Charlie ended up getting to him first, and so when she heard him scream, that's what that was. But getting back to it, it's like, the fact of the matter is, you have a position where it's like people can understand why you're doing what you're doing, but for him it's kind of like this machine doesn't have a conscience and stuff like that. Like, we got to get them, because eventually he's like, what if in the future it's like it's 10% now and they're telling us to smile and be happy about it, or what about in the future where the law says, because the law was like you have to have at the very least 10% of humans when it comes to employment, but it's like, what if they change it to 7 or 5? Like, I'm looking forward to the future of people, not these automatic machines. But even the doctor was like, obviously the system has a consciousness because it went to me for help. That in itself speaks volumes. And it's like all these, you're trying to fight for this cause, but you're killing people. And for him, it's like a sacrifice necessary. Even the people he's going to kill with all these robots that are going to deliver these packages with little bombs, which is such a shame, dude. It's like, it's heartbreaking that like he would go to such extremes to prove his point. Hence why I was kind of like, you understand where he's coming from, but obviously he's going to the very, very extreme and radical side of things. And the doctors and the others were constantly trying to talk him out of this, because even he felt regret about it. Because even the doctor was like, you came here with a mission, but you didn't expect to fall in love with Kiera. Maybe if Kiera was around, maybe she would have been able to want to convince him. But now, that the machine was trying, the system was trying to teach him the point of what he was about to do. Maybe Kiera not being there was enough not to push him in the right direction. Also, kind of a little note, just to kind of back away from the slightly depressing. I noticed that the package for her had an X on it. I only learned about that a little while ago. Apparently, that's a British thing. I had no idea. Like adding X's to messages and stuff. I think it's meant specifically for loved ones, kind of like the whole XOXO situation. But I guess it's kind of a thing. I don't remember, because like I picked it up because like I think, was it Gavin and Ellie on the Rooster Teeth podcast talked about it a while back. I can't remember if it's just something you just every day do in British like messages and stuff like that, like a text message or stuff. But I think specifically it's only to like loved ones particularly, but it might just be like I guess it'd be kind of the equivalency of like putting like a heart emoji in a sense. I don't know. I don't remember. It was a while ago, but it was a huge British thing, and I saw the message up there, and I was like, all right, totally like jogged my memory about that to a certain extent. So I don't remember the full extent of it, but I was like, oh, that's such an interesting like British thing, like to add that like that. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. But nevertheless, the doctor ended up setting all the postmen to come to this one location, teleport there, obviously. And it's like, oh, make it so that their job is to deliver these things, the boxes to themselves and pop the, bubble wrap. And that's the saddest thing too. Like the weapon was literally bubble wrap, because it's like, yeah, because what's the one thing that people would do? Bubble wrap, because it's the only consistent, and you can't modifying the like things inside of packages, making them bombs or something like that would have flagged too much. But bubble wrap is such a thing that would go under the wire, like no one would really notice it. So, but it's like, oh, everyone pops bubble wrap, and it's just kind of like, man, you weaponize something. It's such a like like, it's something you probably wouldn't even think about. It's just because it's such kind of almost secondhand nature for so many people to just grab it and pop it. Even at the end, Grandma's about ready to pop it, and Ron was like, I wouldn't do that for you. And he's like, oh yeah. And even at the end, it kind of turned and looked to the bobber out, because part of, I think on some level, all of them were like, it's still kind of do want to bob it, even though it's like, yeah, but it's Kerblam. It's like, oh yeah, I know, you can't. So it's sad how it all ended. Like, they were luckily able to stop all the explosions by having all of the Kerblam bots destroy themselves, but also Charlie ended up dying in an explosion. And it's like, also in retrospect, it's kind of like, oh man, that's why the robot grabbed Charlie, was trying to grab him. Until Judy did the badass thing and ripped its head off like that. I was like, oh, that's pretty awesome. That was pretty cool. But it's kind of like, yeah, because the system was trying to stop him. That's what this was all about. You know, like I said, it's just kind of like, oh, they look all creepy and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, Charlie's such a cool guy. He's fun. He's totally in love, this and that. And it's like, oh yeah, and you kind of flip the script, because it's like, oh, your system's actually the good guy in this situation. He's kind of the bad, not kind of is the bad guy. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So it's just sad that things kind of ended this way, because all those employees, like including Dan, I was hoping on everything Dan would be found alive, but it's like, nope, they were all experiments for him to, I guess that was more perspective of the fact is that he was picking up his plan more and more, because it was like, what was it, like a few people disappeared earlier on, then like one person, and then all of a sudden 4. So it did, like, the rate of people disappearing started ramping up. So it's kind of like he was experimenting more and more, because I guess his plans were kind of entering the final stages. But maybe Kiera being around kind of made him not want to go down that route. Well, no, because even when Kiera was there, he still ended up kidnapping Dan to test it out. So, but I guess, you know, there was some silver lining to this sad situation, that Judy was kind of like, going forward, we're going to make it so that there are more human employees added to the roster, because it's like, if you know, because Charlie is just an example of, he's just one, because there could easily be other people like him out there. And then, you know, Slade was also talking about the fact is that the employees are getting a two-week paid vacation. They'll get a free shuttle back to the planet and everything like that. So, like I said, it's a terrible situation, but at least there was some silver lining to it. It's kind of like another episode back-to-back that kind of leaves you kind of feeling like a little, well, that kind of sucked. I mean, luckily Charlie was stopped, but it's still a sad circumstances in the end, because it's like, oh, you know, you were hoping that, you know, love would be enough to kind of stop him from everything. I was thinking like, oh, maybe the doctor would be able to convince him to stop. It's like, nope. He had every opportunity to stop, and he didn't, and he kind of paid the price for it. So, but like I said, overall, a very interesting episode with all of those elements. I'm very interested to see what the next episode has in store for us. And now moving on to this week's episode of Charmed. A very interesting episode. A lot of things went down, so let's break everything down. Obviously, Maggie's still dealing with the whole situation and the complications of her and Kappa. And it's kind of sad. There's that moment where Lucy's like, the moment she's like, Maggie's bringing over the drink, I'm like, she's going to pour it on her, isn't she? And it's like, oh yeah, and she's about ready to pour, and then Mel stops, and I'm like, that's so cool. But Maggie's like, no, I deserve this. I kissed her boyfriend. And then Macy is like, no one deserves this. And before time keeps resuming, Macy moves it enough so that it just falls on her chest. I'm like, yo, that's sisterhood right there. That's pretty dope. It's just, I mean, of course they do that, but it's just kind of like so sad that Maggie felt like she deserved it. But basically, it turns out, you know, Lucy wants to have nothing to do with her. Maggie keeps trying, but to no avail. Then Lucy gets possessed by a ghost named Brenda, which is interesting because I guess, I don't remember. Can ghosts always be seen by everyone? Maybe, I guess, because she was bound to Lucy, she had a physical form, because everyone saw her, even though she was, like, possessing. Well, because she wasn't really possessing. Well, I guess it was some form of possession, but she was doing it to only Lucy, yet everyone in the sisterhood could see her, even, you know, Macy. Maggie. I was thinking maybe because Maggie's a witch, she's more in tune with the supernatural, so it's like, no, everyone else in Kappa could see it, so it's like, okay, what's up with that? That's interesting. I guess ghosts exist on such a plane that they can literally manifest themselves, kind of to have a corporeal form, I guess, which is interesting. I don't remember that from the original series or not. What they're like, I think you could see ghosts no matter what. It's actually kind of interesting because they initially thought she was a banshee. I'm like, hey, that's interesting, just because, like, there might have been others, but the only banshee I can think of is the one they faced early-ish on in the series. I think it was that? I can't remember, because I know at one point Phoebe became a banshee. I just don't remember the whole banshee thing. Was that before Paige or after? I want to say it might have been before. That might have been with the whole Prue situation, but I don't remember necessarily. So that was kind of interesting, but it turns out like she's not, because the girls ended up using a spell, went back in time, and just kind of, you actually kind of feel bad because the way Jenna was kind of an asshole. Side note, the actress who played Jenna present day, she looks so familiar. I can't place what I recognize her from. But nevertheless, it's kind of like, man, Jenna is an asshole because it's like, oh, she's calling Brenda out. She's even kind of putting her on a megaphone. And I guess it's fair because the girls were so sidetracked with seeing their mom in the past that they didn't pay enough attention to Brenda. Because for them, it's kind of like, okay, we got the story, like she was humiliated and she ended up dying. So that basically, that's what was driving her. But in actuality, she's kind of vindictive. It turns out that Brenda was actually kind of a terrible person. She slept with so-and-so's boyfriend and other person's boyfriend. She got kicked out for that. Plus she snuck in, stole a candle. I'm guessing it's the thing that the handle that Lucy ended up, lighting up, that kind of ended up releasing her spirit. So I'm guessing that's it. But it's such a shame because basically she subsequently has been killing people every so often in the same way that she died, just because she's vindictive against like that sorority house. It's just kind of, I guess she picks on people who are in a similar circumstance as her, who feel like they've been outed, like they're in such a low place that she can push them to do that, which is kind of a sad situation. And it turns out when it comes to like a lot of Kappa situation, like the murders the deaths pop up in the newspaper, but Kappa's never mentioned in it because people cover it up, which is kind of a shame. And so that's why it only seemed like Brenda was the only death. And so luckily Lucy was able to save her. Not Lucy, jeez, I don't know. Maggie, jeez, I apologize, I'm not thinking straight. And I thought it was kind of an interesting thing because Maggie, I'm doing that, I'm sorry. Maggie realized like, oh, everything I'm doing, like I apologize and stuff like that, but that was from a selfish point of view of like, rather than focusing on your needs, I was so concerned about me. I want you to forgive me because I felt like on the outs with the Kappa. So it was like, it was for selfish reasons that I was apologizing rather than just apologizing to you and, being there for you. I just had my own ulterior motives, even though I was thinking it was, I thought that was kind of a nice kind of like, looking at yourself in the mirror, because she looked at it with like the whole Brenda situation of just like, I was being selfish. I wasn't really apologizing for you. So luckily Maggie was able to kind of reach through to Lucy, and even Lucy forgave her, even in the state that she was. And when it's all said and done, it does seem like they can repair the relationship. It's like, I know you probably don't want me around and I'll give you your space, but I want, like that, I hope we can be friends. Cause I thought that was kind of interesting because it didn't seem like it. Cause it just seemed like, but I guess for her, like, Lucy is, like, I guess for Lucy, Maggie was the only person she really did see her kind of talk to a lot. Like, she put a lot of energy into, like, Maggie, trying to get Maggie into Kappa, because I think she wanted to try and spend as much time with Maggie if she could, because it's like, because she would be saying, like, you were my friend, I trust you, and it's like, huh. Like, prior to that whole Parker situation, I never really guessed that. I just thought it was just kind of like, oh, this sisterhood, but it's like, no, for her, like, it went beyond just like the whole Kappa thing, which I guess it feeds into it, like the friendship, the sisterhood, but it just kind of interested me. I didn't realize like Maggie meant that much to her. And I thought that was kind of a pretty nice thing of like, yeah, things are a little rocky now, but they are on their way to kind of repairing the relationship. So I thought that was pretty dope. Another aspect of this is obviously Mel. Mel's having a hard time adjusting to the new situation of Nico. She's wearing the same shirt that she wore when they first met. She's even reluctant to kind of go to the job interview that Harry set up for, simply because it's like, I don't want to move on, because moving on would mean accepting it. Like, getting on to this new stage of my life is meaning I'm moving on without her, and that's a hard reality to kind of have to deal with, because it's like, you obviously this is someone you love, that you miss greatly, and just moving on makes you almost feel like you're forgetting them to a certain extent, which is kind of, it is the saddest thing about that situation. Just kind of like it was already a hard decision, but even just living in the ramifications of it just makes it even harder, just because it makes it that much more real. So, because it's kind of interesting, because Mel, I talked about the fact is she never took Maggie's love for Kappa seriously, in the sense of never realizing how much it meant to her. But it's kind of like, yeah, we all kind of have to have our thing outside of being a witch. And for her, like, that was like her original job plus Nico, but now that foundation is gone now. Hence why she's kind of like in the state that she's in right now. You know, it's like, oh, she's saying she was, you know, looking into all these demons that potentially could have had something to do with their mom's death as well as the other elders, because it has to deal with like electricity. So it's like a specific electricity demon, which I love that whole situation of like, okay, why does it have to be like hundreds of demons like that? Couldn't it just be 5? And it's like, oh, the ghost situation. There's Maggie's like 5, and Harry's like hundreds, ranging from Casper level to Conjuring level. So that's interesting. That was kind of neat. But yeah, I'm interested to see what ends up happening with Null in that regard of like what steps she takes going forward. You know, I doubt it's time for I doubt it's kind of like, oh, new relationship. That's probably going to be far off in the distance. It's still kind of a fresh wound, but it's like slowly picking yourself up after like situation like that, because it wasn't even necessarily a breakup, because it's like, oh yeah, you basically ended up making it so your relationship never happened, so it didn't count as a breakup. It's a more messed up breakup, because it's like the other person doesn't know you exist, they don't know the history. You have to carry the burden of knowing everything about the other person, you know, who know nothing about you, has never met you, have all these experiences that technically don't exist. They only exist to you but not to the other person. And it's like, that situation is even more heartbreaking when you actually sit there and think about that. Now, also in this episode, we had the whole Galvin situation, his birthday, and Macy comes over to the party and she brings Harry. I like that. I was like, hey, maybe we can play this up a little bit, make it seem like Harry's your date. But they were immediately like, no, we're not dating. I love that. Like, Summer was like, oh my God, you totally made these things, that cheese thing that he was talking about. What is it? Rabeat? It's like this special cheese thing. She was super into it. And Harry's like, oh yeah, things, it's like, Macy was like, oh, things aren't that awkward. And then, you know, Summer saw her checking out Galvin just because she was looking at the tattoo, and it's like, oh yeah, that makes it super awkward. Summer even calls her out. It's like, I try to be cool before, but yo, back up. And it's like, oh, come on. But I guess it's kind of like you are the ex in this situation, which is weird considering you and Galvin never really went that far. It was more so like you kissed and everything. Like, it was never like an established relationship and stuff like that. So it's like, okay. But still, it's kind of sad, because it kind of makes you go, oh, is she being a little jealous? But at the same time, it is kind of like you are kind of the ex being around. So I guess it would make you, as a new girlfriend, a little uncomfortable, that whole situation. So it was actually interesting because like they ended up kind of making Macy and Harry kind of bond in this episode in that regard, just because it's like, you know, it's like, oh, you know, because it turns out it's a cowrie shell. It's basically meant, it's put on an infant when they're young to basically protect them from magical beings, which I guess would include a witch. So it's like, was it activated by the fact is that she kissed him, which might have been, because for Macy, she's saying like, oh, the reason why they broke up, well, things didn't really work out, is because she's like, oh, I did that all on my own. I just kind of not really good relationship and just kind of pushed people away. And Harry's kind of like, no, it's not like that, you know? Which is interesting because like part of me wonders, is that what it was? Like, did that subconsciously affect Galvin in a way that he didn't really realize it, or what? Because that's why only Macy can see it and no one else can, because it's specifically tied to her, because we find out some stuff about Macy. But I'll get to that in a second. So that in itself is kind of like a sad situation of like, you do have the complicated situation where it's like, it is you legitimately trying to look after him, but I think it is also like, oh, your feelings are involved too. But because basically we ended up finding out when Mel and Maggie went back and, well, did a little bit of a spiritual trip, time travel thing, they ended up hearing from their mom that something was wrong with the pregnancy. It felt a little bit different, and that was her pregnant with Macy. Then Macy ends up going to see this priestess later on about, and it turns out it's like the priestess is like, oh, you had the EB in you. And it's like, what is the EB? Essentially, it means darkness. And I was like, because when this was all said and done, we're like, oh, wait. I was like, what? Are we setting Macy to be up to not just be a witch? Is she have something else too? Which is interesting because it's like her being the half sister and everything. That's exactly what Paige's story was. It's like, oh, being half witch, but also half white lighter. But obviously Macy's thing is something different considering darkness and stuff like that. I'm like, whoa. So are we making like Macy like half demon, or what is it exactly that's bringing out this darkness in her? Does it have something to do with her dad's side of the family, or what? Like, is her dad a demon? So that kind of makes Macy like this crazy hybrid, which would be interesting. That's the only thing I can associate the darkness with, but maybe it's something else entirely. Maybe like Marisol was a good witch, and Macy's dad was kind of an evil witch. So the balance of light and darkness in her it's a constant struggle, which would be an interesting element for one of the sisters to have to kind of deal with that on a continuous basis, because that might be something where, because even she's kind of like, oh yeah, the fact of the matter is the first thing I agreed with killing Angela Wu, so it's kind of like maybe that darkness in me is true, but like, you know, the others had found out and they're like, no, that's not you, that priestess lady was wrong. But because they saw how much this affected her, they weren't willing to tell Macy about the conversation they heard about from their mom, because they felt like it probably drive her even more to believe that about herself. So now they know that, so they're probably going to be looking forward to that, like looking into that secretly. But we also have Macy looking into herself, because she ends up looking at one of the pillars and finds a key. Interestingly enough, has a pentagram at the top. So I'm like, okay, what's up with that? What's that key a key to, you know? I mean, it also makes you wonder, is this the reason why Hunter and his dad were after Macy specifically? It's like, oh, they couldn't get what they needed from Marisol, they might as well get, because it's like, why out of any charmed one? I mean, I guess it would make sense, it'd be easier to get to Macy, but why Macy specifically? And I'm wondering, is it because of his darkness, or is that something they have no idea about? It's just kind of interesting they ended up picking Macy, so I'm like, it might have something to do with that darkness inside her that they need that, plus her being a charmed one and everything. So it does make you wonder, like, obviously this is connected to her being a Hebe, and like the Hebe, I said Hebe, the Hebe in her, the darkness in her. But if it were like any of the other sisters, like if it was just like Macy's witch side, would the cowrie shell have activated? Like, it is about magical beings, but is it more specifically the darkness in Macy, or is it even just the witch side of her? Is it like glowing more and more because it wasn't, I mean, to be fair, she never, you know, saw that before, but maybe it's not, maybe it's only because they kissed. When they kissed, it did activate, because it's like, whoa, you gotta stay away from this, danger, or what? I mean, how far does the protection go? Like, if, like, after a while, when it continues to get brighter, will it be to the point Macy can't even get close to him without maybe feeling sick or getting hurt, potentially? I have no idea. I'm very interested to kind of see where that all ends up going. What's also interesting, too, I only noticed it this episode, but the whole Book of Shadows, it's written in Latin, and they speak the spells in Latin. I was like, right. I guess it's because, I mean, it stems from the fact this is their Spanish heritage, I assume. I mean, because there was that one spell their mom literally wrote in Spanish, only that for them to find. But it's like, well, I mean, you know, Latin, like, it's the root of Spanish. I mean, it's that for other languages too, but I think it's just like, it's definitely Spanish. But then again, there's like multiple variants of Spanish, like depending on where you're from, like the Spanish can change like that, which I had no idea, which is kind of a fascinating thing. But it's like, I never paid that attention to this episode. I was like, have the spells all been in a different language? I was like, is it Spanish? It's like, no, specifically it's Latin. I'm like, that's interesting, because I don't remember the spells in the original series ever being in anything but English. Like, it was just like they said, which is how I go, it's just kind of like a little small detail that I just didn't notice until now. I was like, oh, that's so interesting. I don't know, I think it's interesting at the very least. There's also the Harry leaving situation, which is kind of sad. I did like that the fact is that Macy and Mel kind of threw Maggie kind of like a sisterhood thing of like, no, you might not be part of Kappa, but the fact of the matter is you're part of this exclusive sisterhood. They even made Harry an honorary member because he's leaving. Just because it's like the elders are like, yeah, you kind of got a new job. You're no longer needed to protect the charmed ones, which obviously there is more trouble on its way, as we can see. But I'm so fascinated to see what, I mean, could you get the feeling like, me being me, kind of was like, are they trying to set up a Harry and Mel situation? Not Mel, Macy situation? I was thinking that's what they were hinting at, but maybe that was just my imagination. It's just like, oh no, we're friends. Oh, I'm glad you think of me as a friend. I think of you three as a friend. I was like, oh, okay. Because I was thinking like, are they like, for whatever reason, I was thinking like they were going to kiss or something. I don't know why. It just seemed like one of those moments like, are you about to kiss? Or is they going to make a thing of this? Are you going to be the Leo and Piper of this show? Which would be interesting. But maybe not the case. I'm probably like thinking too much about it. I mean, especially because Macy's literally just going through the whole Galvin situation. So, I don't know, like I said, just me reading too much into it. They might make it so that he never ends up with any of them. Like, I feel like if he's going to end up with anyone, it'd most likely be Macy. I don't know. That's how I kind of feel about it. But like I said, they might make it so it's just like, no, we're not going to go down that route, which I'm fine with. It was just kind of, if for whatever reason, I just got that feeling like, is there something about to happen between us two? But nevertheless, I'm curious to see what Harry's next job is going to be, because for him, it's like, he enjoyed this job because actually they had told him they were reassigning him very soon, but for him it's just like he was super reluctant to kind of change jobs because he liked it so much, because being around them, his job is typically very lonely, and the time he spent with the charm ones felt so good, you know. I mean, they brought him as a friend, brought him as part of the family too, so I'm interested to see where that kind of all takes us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.